Good morning, y'all. I hope you're having a fantastic morning. It has been really exciting here. I met up with a friend this morning and she gave me these amazing seedlings. There's some zucchini and cucumbers and tomatoes and squash, and I am so excited to get these in the ground. I have left space in my garden beds for these, and then we're adding one last box to the corner of our garden over here. It's the very last space we have with the current setup until we can figure out how to expand our gardening space. But we are very excited to get some new things growing, and I was sitting here looking at the seedlings and my eyes are always drawn to the tomatoes. It is probably my favorite thing to grow. It's one of my favorite things to eat. And so I thought I would do a quick video on tomatoes. If you already know about them, if you grow them often, none of this is going to be new information to you. I am a fairly new gardener myself. This is my first real year of gardening. Now, I've done some small garden beds, I've grown in some pots before, but this is the first year to have some larger size raised beds and a variety of things growing. And I have taken the time to try to do some research before we planted this year as to what would grow best here. And tomatoes are one of the things that came up a lot, and I like eating them, so why not, right? But I wanted to know a little bit more about tomatoes themselves. So I want to talk to you guys about varieties, pruning, planting, that sort of thing today. So that's what the video is going to be about. First of all you really need to know is that there are a lot of different varieties of tomatoes. There's small ones, like a grape tomato. There's great big ones like oxheart tomatoes. There's everything in between. You can get heirloom tomatoes, which are really beautiful. And basically that's just a fancy word for saying that that particular fruit, that type of tomato, has been kept the same and passed down for generations. I believe it's at least 50 years. It might be more than that, but that particular fruit has been the same for a long period of time, whereas hybrids are fairly new. There's nothing wrong with a hybrid tomato. In fact, at one point, all heirlooms were hybrid tomatoes. They were new variations. So don't get confused on all that. Pick a tomato that you think you're gonna like. We particularly like grape tomatoes, cherry tomatoes. We had a few golden pear tomatoes at our homeschool co-op farm, and I like them enough to try 2 plants this year. So we'll see how those go. And then next year I want to get into some bigger varieties, some slicers, and some more heirlooms. Let's talk about the tomato plant itself. So if you compare it to another plant, so this is not a tomato, but you can see the stem is smooth. It's a smooth stem. Most plants are like that, but on a tomato plant, hopefully you guys can see the little fibers that are on the edges of the stalks, the stems. All these little fuzzy fibers, if you will, have the potential to become roots. So a tomato plant, if left to its own devices, if you were to put it in the ground, it would bush out and then sprawl along the ground and grow fruit that way. So it allows the stem, when it touches the ground, to grow roots there wherever it touches. What that means to you as a gardener, one, is that you need to decide how you're going to grow your tomato plant. Are you going to let it grow along the ground, or are you going to grow it up? Are you going to grow it on a trellis, on string like this, on fencing? Figure out where you want to grow your tomato plant. I prefer to grow mine vertically. I don't want it on the ground. I don't want my fruit touching the ground. We have lots and lots of bugs here. It's hot, it's humid. I don't want the fruit to rot before I can ever eat it. So we grow ours up strings. Now this is my first year growing up the string vertical trellising, if you will. Last year we used a metal trellis and it worked. I did not like it. I don't prefer it that way. I had 2 plants on each side, which maybe I just had too many, but that's what it took. And I would weave the plant in and out of the trellis, and so it was hard for me to trim. It was hard for me to pull out the suckers, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then sometimes the fruit would be almost like encaged in all the main stems, the way it had been wound up. If it grew through the fence, it was hard to get back through the other side. So we went with the strings this year, and I'm really, really happy with it. If you're starting your seeds in the ground, you don't really have to worry about this too much. But if you're starting them like this in some sort of cup or grow bag or some little container, so all these are actually individual plants. So you would separate these out and grow one in each spot. When you go to plant them, remember all these fibers are potential roots. So if I were to plant it, to get a healthy plant, I would take these little lower leaves off and I would dig a pretty deep hole and I would plant this seedling all the way up to here and allow all these fibers to grow deep roots so that the plant can get the water it needs and the nutrients it needs and grow big and healthy. The other thing I wanted to go over with you is pruning, but I want you guys to be able to see that up close. So let's hop on over to the tomato plants. Okay, so the first thing I do when pruning my tomato plants, the way that we're growing them, is I cut off these bottom leaves. Now I need to go back in and thin some of this out, but I've purposefully not done it in a little while so that you guys could see what I'm talking about. But there's a few of them, like right in here. Let me move this kale. I have not left any leaves on the bottom, so I can come in and water here and not get all the leaves super wet. Got some tomatoes hiding here in the kale. Aren't they pretty, you guys? They're so much fun to grow. It's so rewarding. Let's come around this way so you can see. So some of these I need to go ahead and trim. So I'm gonna set this up for you. So this one here, I'm gonna go ahead and trim this one off. I'm gonna trim some of these. And I also try to make sure I'm not getting my fruit right here. I don't want to get my fruit and I don't want to get my string. And I'll go back through and pick those up. Let's see where this guy's coming from. Over here. So I just cut those leaves off. It keeps the plant healthier. I can see the ground now. It helps keep the splashback from getting too bad. So basically what that means is when you water, I have not mulched our garden bed. Some people do. I think next year I probably will, and it doesn't have to be with like common like bark mulch. You can use straw, but it just helps keep the moisture in. But without it, what happens is you go to water your garden and then just the dirt splashes back onto the plant along with the water. And because tomatoes don't like to be wet on the leaves, it can cause problems like here. I need to trim this back. I need to adjust that. So another thing about pruning tomato plants is something called suckers. So if you look right here, this is called a sucker. And I know it's that because here's the main stem. I've got another stem coming this way, and it falls right between them, right between that angle. And I pinch those off. Basically, a sucker is another part of the plant that is going to grow a full stem. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if it's growing along the ground, it's going to make the plant bigger, bushier, thicker, and that's fine. Like I said, if you're just letting your plant grow naturally along the ground, but growing it vertically, the tomato plants really like airflow. So if I allow each of these plants to get too full, it won't allow good airflow, and I'm not going to get good fruit. So I'm going through, and some of these are a little bit bigger because I have been waiting to do this so you guys could see it. Like here's a pretty big one. Hopefully you guys can see that. So here's my main stem, here's the side shoot, and then my sucker right here. Most of the time you can just pinch them off. Sometimes I have missed a few. I'm not seeing any right now, but I have missed, oh, here's a decent size one right here. If you guys can see this, I let this one go and it caused the other stem to grow down. It almost displaces it. So that's another reason I like to pull those. Another term you may hear when looking at tomato plants is determinate and indeterminate. And basically, all that means is that the plant, if it's determinate, literally has a determined height and set of blossoms or fruit that it can produce when you plant it. It's not going to get any bigger than its predetermined size. An indeterminate plant is one that obviously is not determined like that. It will keep growing as long as you give it support or allow it to grow along the ground. I grow all indeterminate plants, so I will support them until they reach the top of my trellis, the top here, and then I will have to go in and cut them when I can't reach any further. If I were to let it go, it would keep growing, and then eventually it would get too heavy, it would fall over, and I would probably need to cut it anyways. Some things that they don't like. They do not like a lot of moisture on their leaves. So you bottom water tomato plants. You don't want the leaves up here to stay super wet because they will mold. They'll get blight and they'll mold and it'll kill your plant. Then growing with this string, oh, here's another sucker I gotta grab. Growing with this string, vertical gardening. I did not do this last year. I used a trellis and that was fine. You have to weave the branches in and out of the trellis itself. And they're not super stiff, but they're not flexible either. So you really have to be vigilant about going out there and checking when it needs to be wrapped and maneuvered, because once it grows, like it was growing through our fencing here, since we grew it next to the fence, and it was growing through the fence, and then I either had to break the stem to keep it from growing outside of the garden, or I had to just leave it in the fence, and then the chickens ended up getting it and it was a mess. So with this, I have liked the string better so far, and I can give you a more thorough opinion after this season for sure. But it really is pretty easy. Granted, I'm trying to do it one-handed right now, but I just take it like this, and every couple days I come out and I wrap the string around the stem. Just take it round and round. And now that one is good to go for a while. I'll grab this sucker while I'm at it. And I've been doing that with each of these plants. I have, you know, a few to wrap. It only takes a few minutes, and I feel like I'm able to get better control of each plant individually, whereas with a trellis, I couldn't adjust more than all of them at the same time. Like, I couldn't pick apart which plant was which because they weren't growing this way. They were interwoven. I didn't care for that. Now these ones, these are different varieties, but it gives you an idea of what that looks like at the beginning. So I wait for them to get taller. These look super leggy, but I've just been trimming off the bottom leaves. That's why they look like that. This one still needs trimmed. But I tie a really loose knot at the bottom and then just begin to wrap it as it grows. Here's another one. And so far I've been really, really happy with that. It's turned out pretty well. So these are my plants after a good trimming. I've gone through and pruned out some of the extra branches, pretty much all the suckers that I could find. The bases of them are clear so I can water them, and they're gonna get plenty of airflow. Took a break from pruning the tomato plants to come see what my chickens are squawking about. We've been trying to be really careful with them, only letting them out when we stay out here or when Ariel's out here. We actually put the kids' playhouse there with a water bowl and stuff for Ariel, since I can't leave the garden open or they eat all of it. What are you girls doing? What are you squawking about? What are you squawking about? I hope you're not laying eggs back here. You've ruined this area. I guess I'll let you though. You're pretty cute. Yeah. We have a door out here. When we bought the house, this whole patio area and what was inside was enclosed. So it was like this big sunroom, and it was super hot. You couldn't get to the pool. So we took the door out and the walls, and we want to put a door right there that leads out to our patio. But, hi. Hey, honey. Hi, babe. What's she doing? This is Dottie. She's a pretty sweet girl. Aren't you, baby? Yeah. You're a good girl. Hi. Hi, cutie patootie. What are you doing? False alarm, I guess. Maybe they were just chatting. Finally got my grandpa's boat. It needs a whole lot of work, you guys. I don't know what I'm doing either. It's gonna be a project, but it'll be a fun project. Finally get to take it out on the lake and do some stuff. Okay, girls, since that was a false alarm, I guess I'll get back to pruning. I hope this was helpful to you guys. I am still a brand new gardener. I'm not gonna lie, and I don't pretend to know everything by any means. But I want to encourage everybody to take the opportunity to try and garden. You're not gonna get anywhere if you don't give it a try at some point, and expect to fail at some things, expect to make some mistakes. It's just part of trial and error. Like, we would never expect our loved ones or our kids to get it right the first time and do everything right from here on out. We just have to try. So that was my little bit on tomatoes. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have any advice, let me know. I know there's people watching that are avid gardeners. You've been doing this for years. You've got tips and tricks and all kinds of stuff. I would love to hear from you. I would love to learn. I would love to know what you do. I would love to know your favorite varieties, seeds, what seed catalogs do you use, that sort of thing. So definitely let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't yet. I'm working on trying to provide content as regularly as I can, especially with us all being quarantined at home right now. It gives something positive to watch. Turn off the news and just focus on your home and your family and your mental well-being, you guys. Until next time, I'll see you later.